Last year, almost 400,000 immigrants without legal status were deported from the United States. Officials in the federal government say the crackdown primarily targets immigrants who pose the greatest threat to public safety or national security. But a series of reports by the Boston Globe shows many of those deported have little or no criminal record, while many with a history of major crimes are turned loose in the United States. But the series also raises questions about the process for deciding who stays or goes and how little of that is captured on public record. Our guest is one of the reporters who worked on the series, Milton Valencia. Thank you very much for being with us, Milton.
My pleasure.
The Globe here was on the same trail as I think the Washington Post earlier in the Times. They have some of these horror stories about people who were being deported and something terrible happened. But this is really a broad view of a lot of different factors coming together.
Right, and I think it's meant to be. You know, we wanted to look at the underlying issues of why was it happening, why does it continue to happen, and that's what we did indeed find, is that it's continuing to happen. As we pointed out, 11 deaths in the system last year. A lot of those people weren't criminals, but they were held in criminal jails. So there's this underlying issue of what's happening within these immigration prisons that we wanted to look at.
Talk about one of these horror stories. This was the woman who had a heart condition. She was, what, 29 years old?
29 from Lynn, that's right.
So what happened there?
Well, she is one of the most common immigrants in the detention system. She was someone who wasn't here on administratively. She wasn't here. So we call that administrative offense. She was not a criminal, did not have a criminal past, but she overstayed her visa, which made her unlawfully here. In her case, she recognized that. She was trying to leave, but as she kind of, you know, became part of this massive immigration system, she became part of this culture of secrecy, of this automatic decision to lock people in these criminal jails. And because of that secrecy, she got none of the rights that, you know, one would, under the American judicial system, be entitled to. And because of that, she wasn't entitled to a hearing officer, you know, a judge, not even a court-appointed lawyer to state her case. In her case, she had a significant medical issue, a heart condition. And she really could not bring that to anybody's attention. So for 12 days, she languished really in a criminal jail until she died. Unfortunately, it was tragic.
On the other end of the spectrum here, you have people who most of us would really like to get rid of, and we can't.
That's another issue that we found out. No one wants to see someone in jail when they're not supposed to be there. I think that's the point of it. But in the American system, there's accountability in these decisions. And what we found is there's no accountability in the decision to detain someone, but also to release someone. We found that ICE, because the Immigration Customs Enforcement Agency that does a lot of this detention for the federal government, they were arbitrarily releasing people who could not be deported. And what's at issue here is they were not telling the public about it. They were not telling their local law enforcement partners. They were not telling victims. Law enforcement agencies have a victim notification program that they use, you know, seriously and with sincerity. We couldn't find that in the immigration system. So people are being released because they could not be deported for a variety of reasons. But instead of an accountable system that we, you know, would like to see in the American system, we have an agency that kind of makes its own decisions, and too often it has tragic consequences.
And of course, there was one person whose country of origin refused to accept them, and what happened?
There was, we find that many times, you know. Well, understandably, a country wouldn't want to accept a criminal back into their community, but what happens is someone is left in this legal loophole of sitting in a jail, can't really return to their country. They don't have a home country, and for a variety of reasons, no one asked the State Department to say, can you know, pressure these countries to take these people back, or really ask for a State Department resolution. And because there was no communication between agencies, because of this, you know, shroud of secrecy that we're talking about, decisions are made within one agency to release someone, and there's really no follow-up effect. And we're finding that over the last 4 years, millions of people were released. More than 8 million people were released, 250 of which were murderers, and in some occasions they went back and murdered again.
These decisions are all made by judges, but explain to our viewers, this is not like your regular Suffolk Superior Court here.
Right, right. This is, I mean, one of the issues as we talk about immigration reform that's going to happen is a real serious look at the makeup of the immigration agencies. There's, immigration wasn't written into our Constitution, so the executive branch has long taken it upon itself to regulate immigration. And some people say rightfully so. The president, the executive branch, should have that authority to to patrol the country's borders and regulate immigration and who's coming into this country, but there's no balance of a judicial officer reviewing those decisions. The same immigration courts that we're talking about here are all within the Department of Justice, all within the executive branch. So that means you have one agency, the executive branch, that is, prosecutor, judge, jury, making all these decisions, and it's decisions as we see with a young woman dying or a murderer being released. There are decisions that have a significant effect on the community.
I don't know if it was you or one of your colleagues, but there was that trip to some remote outpost in search of the court.
Right. Lumpkin, Georgia. That was Maria who had gone there, driving down. I mean, that's another issue of, you think courts, you think this beautiful, I cover the courthouse, and you see this beautiful building with engraved, justice is being served inscriptions. She didn't find that in Lumpkin. She found a courthouse that was located in back of a jail. So she has to cross over canopy razor wire through locked doors to press a button to have a guard let her in. And this was her courthouse she found. Miles, an hour's drive away from the main city, just really in a remote area that I don't think our founding fathers ever envisioned when they envisioned an American courthouse. I
know some readers will come to this and they'll say, well, we're talking about people being threatened with deportation who are not American citizens, they might not have legal status. So if they don't have any rights to speak of, then why is that a problem for anybody else?
It shouldn't be a problem. In a best case scenario, it shouldn't be a problem. But what becomes a problem is when you call it a civil system. They call it a civil administrative system. That's fine, but what we're seeing is in some cases, civil decisions aren't being made. There are decisions to release murderers to the streets without telling anyone, and there's other decisions to hold someone in a criminal facility with shackles. These are people without criminal backgrounds. Keep in mind, immigration is not a criminal offense. It's a civil offense, a civil violation, similar to a traffic offense. So imagine being brought into a traffic court and then thrown into a criminal jail for 12 days. There's really nothing civil about that, and I think that's the balance of the two, is to create a system where the executive branch can effectuate immigration rules, but with the accountability that still holds truth to our American values.
And of course, as you point out, no matter how much some of them might be straying from legal requirements, a lot of them have relatives who have legal status and might even be U.S. citizens.
And that's another issue as well when we're looking at immigration courts and the people who are making these arrests. One hand doesn't know what the other is doing, so they're arbitrary decisions. It depends who you encounter. We have judges in Texas who are denying all asylum cases. Judges in New York who are approving them all. So really, there's because of that lack of accountability, that obvious secrecy, there's really no standard that I don't think even the people within the agency are aware of.
A little guesswork on your part here, because even if most people wanted more accountability to make sure things are done right, it looks as if it would cost more money, and we have already been spending more money in cracking down. So
I don't know if that's the case. It takes $122 a day to lock someone up in an immigration prison. It takes, I think, $14 a day to keep them on an alternative to detention program. And we're talking about illegal immigration, but you'd be surprised that people who have families here, who are not criminals, who have families and children here, cases, who have parents living here, they show up to these hearings, over 90% approval rating, attendance rating, where they do attend these hearings. So I think really when we talk about reforms, there needs to be a serious look at the underlying issue of the immigration system. It's not just who should be in this country, who should not be. It's once someone's here and you want to enforce your laws, how to do that, how do you do that? And we're finding an agency that really does it by its own standards.
Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you.
From the Boston Globe, Milton Valencia.